You're standing in a chicken yard outside a farmhouse in LaGrange County, Indiana, watching 34 hens move through a quarter-acre paddock with the focused intensity of animals that know exactly what they are looking for. No feed trough, no grain bag propped against the fence post, no commercial pellet dispenser bolted to the coop wall, just chickens doing what chickens were doing for 10,000 years before the grain industry decided that the most profitable bird was a bird that couldn't feed itself without a monthly delivery from a supplier 3 states away. The woman who owns these hens spends $1.25 a week feeding them. Not $1.25 per bird, $1.25 total. For 34 hens, her egg production runs between 28 and 31 eggs per day consistently across the laying season. Her hens live an average of 6 to 7 years compared to the 18-month productive lifespan of a commercially fed laying hen before productivity drops to the point where the operation replaces the flock. Her feed cost for an entire year is less than what a suburban backyard chicken keeper spends in a single week on bagged layer pellets from the farm supply store. A poultry science researcher at Purdue University named Dr. Catherine Marsh spent 2 full laying seasons documenting the Amish feeding system in LaGrange County as part of what she described to her department as an informal comparative nutrition study. The nutritional profile of eggs produced by the Amish-fed hens she analyzed exceeded commercially fed hens in omega-3 fatty acid content by 340% and vitamin D content by 600%. Her department declined to publish the findings. The Grain Industry Trade Association had provided $2.3 million in research funding to Purdue's Agricultural College in the 3 years preceding her study. Marsh submitted her data independently to a small peer-reviewed poultry journal in 2019. It was accepted, reviewed, and published in a journal with 3,800 subscribers. It has never been cited in any mainstream agricultural publication. It has never appeared in any extension service recommendation. It has never influenced a single commercial poultry feeding guideline in the United States. 340% more omega-3. 600% more vitamin D. Published, reviewed, ignored. The pattern should be familiar by now. Here is the number that changes everything. Feed cost represents between 60 and 70% of the total production expense in commercial egg operations, according to the American Egg Board's own industry data. The United States produces approximately 113 billion eggs per year. The feed required to produce those eggs generates billions of dollars annually for the grain processing and animal feed industries. Every backyard flock, every small farm operation, every Amish chicken yard that feeds itself on something other than purchased grain represents revenue those industries will never collect. The system was not designed to produce the healthiest egg at the lowest cost to the farmer. It was designed to create a permanent dependency between the person raising the bird and the company selling the feed. The Amish in LaGrange County broke that dependency 150 years ago and have been producing superior eggs at a fraction of the cost ever since. The foundation of the Amish feeding system is a concept so simple it sounds like it cannot possibly replace a 50-pound bag of commercially formulated layer pellets. It is called the living system, and it means the chicken's environment produces the feed rather than a factory producing it and shipping it to you. A chicken left to its own instincts and given access to a sufficiently managed environment will meet between 70 and 90% of its own nutritional requirements without any supplemental grain whatsoever. The Amish do not eliminate grain entirely in most operations. They reduce it to a minor supplement rather than the primary feed source. And that distinction is the entire gap between $1.25 a week and $25 a week. Here is how the living system works in practice across 7 specific components that the LaGrange County community has refined over 5 generations of continuous operation. The first component is rotational paddock grazing, and it is the structural foundation everything else builds on. The Amish divide their chicken yard into 4 to 6 separate paddock sections using simple, movable fencing made from wooden stakes and wire netting that costs approximately $40 in materials for a complete rotational system serving up to 50 birds. The flock occupies one paddock section at a time for 5 to 7 days before being moved to the next section. The vacated paddock is left to rest and regenerate for 3 to 4 weeks before the flock returns. During that rest period, the paddock vegetation, insects, worms, and soil biology recover completely from the impact of the flock's occupation. When the hens return, they find a paddock at peak biological productivity, dense with the insects, seeds, green material, and soil organisms that constitute their natural diet. A single paddock system without rotation is picked clean within days and becomes a barren dirt yard that forces total dependency on supplemental feed. A rotational system maintains permanent biological productivity that the flock harvests continuously. The LaGrange County operations running rotational paddocks consume between 75 and 85% less supplemental grain than equivalent flocks on static yards, according to Marsh's documented observations across 14 separate farm operations during her 2-season study. The second component is the compost feeding system, and it is the technique that generates the most surprise among people seeing it for the first time. The Amish place their primary compost operation directly inside the chicken yard. Kitchen scraps, garden waste, spoiled produce, vegetable trimmings, and farm organic waste are deposited in a designated compost area within the paddock rather than in a separate compost pile outside the chicken yard. The hens work the compost pile continuously, scratching through the material in search of the insects, larvae, worms, and decomposing plant matter that the pile generates as it breaks down. A compost pile in active decomposition generates extraordinary insect activity. A single cubic yard of actively composting organic material supports larvae populations sufficient to provide meaningful protein supplementation for up to 20 hens. The hens accelerate the composting process through their scratching and manure deposition, which adds nitrogen that speeds decomposition and generates more insect activity, which feeds more hens, which accelerates more decomposition. It is a closed loop that produces both compost and feed simultaneously from material that would otherwise be waste. The LaGrange County families produce finished garden compost as a secondary byproduct of a system whose primary function is feeding their chickens, and they consider both outputs equally valuable. The third component is black soldier fly larvae cultivation, and this is where the Amish feeding system moves from traditional practice into something that modern entomological research has spent the last decade trying to industrialize and sell back to farmers at premium prices. Black soldier fly larvae, Hermetia illucens, are arguably the most nutritionally dense feed ingredient available for poultry. They contain 40 to 44% protein by dry weight, 30 to 35% fat with a favorable fatty acid profile, and a calcium to phosphorus ratio that closely matches the requirements of laying hens without supplementation. A laying hen consuming black soldier fly larvae as 20 to 30% of her diet requires significantly less supplemental calcium, less supplemental protein, and produces eggs with measurably improved nutritional profiles compared to grain-fed hens. This is the biological mechanism behind the omega-3 and vitamin D differentials that Marsh documented. The larvae bioconvert organic waste into high-quality protein with an efficiency that no grain-based feed system can approach. Modern agricultural entrepreneurs are currently attempting to build industrial black soldier fly cultivation facilities and sell the larvae as a premium feed ingredient at significant cost per pound. The Amish in LaGrange County maintain simple larvae cultivation bins made from wooden boxes with mesh bottoms suspended over collection trays, fed on kitchen scraps and garden waste, and producing continuous larvae output that the flock harvests directly. The bin costs $12 in materials. The feed input is kitchen waste. The output is the most nutritionally complete poultry feed ingredient available at any price, produced at zero cost from material that would otherwise require disposal. The fourth component is managed insect habitat, and it represents the kind of deliberate ecological engineering that modern agriculture has spent 80 years dismantling and is now spending billions of dollars trying to recreate through synthetic means. The Amish maintain specific vegetation structures around and within their chicken paddocks designed to maximize insect population density and diversity. Tall grass borders left unmowed along paddock edges provide habitat for grasshoppers, crickets, and beetles, whose populations the flock harvests during their paddock occupation periods. Rotting log piles positioned at paddock margins harbor beetle larvae, millipedes, and other invertebrates that provide concentrated protein when the hens scratch them apart. Shallow water features, as simple as a partially buried ceramic dish kept filled with rainwater, create habitat for aquatic invertebrates and the amphibians that attract and concentrate additional insect activity around them. The Amish manage these habitat features with the same intentionality they bring to the paddock rotation system, understanding that the insect population supported by a managed habitat is a feed crop that regrows without planting, without fertilizing, and without any input beyond the management of the physical environment that supports it. The fifth component is the fermented feed supplement, and this is the one element of the LaGrange County system that involves a purchased grain input, used in dramatically reduced quantity and prepared in a way that transforms its nutritional value entirely. The Amish ferment whatever grain they use before feeding it. Whole grains, typically a mixture of whole oats, whole wheat berries, and cracked corn purchased in bulk at a cost of approximately 18 cents per pound, are submerged in water in ceramic crocks and left to ferment at room temperature for 48 to 72 hours before feeding. Lactofermentation during that period produces lactic acid that reduces the grain's phytic acid content by up to 60%. Phytic acid is an anti-nutritional compound in raw grain that binds minerals and prevents their absorption by the hen's digestive system. A hen eating raw grain absorbs significantly less of the calcium, zinc, iron, and phosphorus in that grain than a hen eating the same grain after fermentation. This means fermented grain delivers more nutrition per pound than raw grain, which means less grain is required to meet supplemental nutritional needs, which is one of the mechanisms through which the Amish achieve their dramatically reduced feed costs without compromising hen health or productivity. The fermented grain also contains beneficial bacteria that support gut health, improve feed conversion efficiency, and reduce the pathogenic load in the flock's digestive system, reducing disease incidence without any antibiotic supplementation. Commercial poultry operations use antibiotics partly to compensate for the gut health deficits created by feeding raw, unfermented grain to birds whose digestive systems were designed for a fermented, pre-digested food environment. The Amish ferment the grain and eliminate the need for the antibiotic. The drug companies would prefer you did not know that sequence of cause and effect. The sixth component is the fodder system, specifically the sprouting of whole grains into fresh green fodder that the Amish grow year-round as a living feed supplement that provides vitamins, enzymes, and chlorophyll unavailable in any dry feed ingredient regardless of how it is formulated. Whole wheat berries or whole oats soaked in water for 12 hours and then spread in shallow trays in a warm location germinate within 24 hours and produce a dense mat of green sprouts within 6 to 8 days. The sprouting process transforms the grain biochemically. Vitamin C, which is absent in dry grain, appears in meaningful quantities within 48 hours of germination. Vitamin E content increases by up to 300% during sprouting. Enzyme activity that supports digestion increases dramatically. The protein in the sprouted grain becomes more bioavailable as complex storage proteins are partially broken down into amino acids during germination. The Amish maintain a continuous sprouting rotation, starting a new tray every day so that trays at various stages of development are always available, providing a constant supply of fresh green feed through winter months when paddock vegetation is unavailable. The cost is the price of the whole grain, which at bulk rates runs approximately 18 cents per pound, and the trays produce approximately 6 times their input weight in finished fodder, making the effective cost of the fresh green feed approximately 3 cents per pound. There is no commercial feed ingredient available at 3 cents per pound that provides the vitamin and enzyme profile of fresh sprouted grain. The commercial feed industry's solution to the vitamin deficit in dry grain is synthetic vitamin supplementation added during pellet manufacturing. The Amish solution is to let the grain come alive before feeding it and allow the living plant to produce the vitamins that biology has always produced them. The seventh component is the mineral system, and it is the most overlooked element of the entire LaGrange County approach. because it addresses a nutritional need that most backyard chicken keepers solve by purchasing oyster shell from a feed store without ever questioning whether a purchased product is the optimal solution to the problem it claims to solve. Laying hens require significant calcium for eggshell production. A hen laying daily requires approximately 4 grams of calcium per egg, most of which is mobilized from dietary sources rather than bone reserves in a properly fed bird. Commercial operations provide calcium through purchased oyster shell or calcium carbonate supplements at ongoing cost. The Amish provide calcium through 3 zero-cost sources managed as a continuous system. Eggshells from the kitchen are dried on the stove surface, crushed, and fed back to the flock. The calcium in eggshell is identical in bioavailability to purchased oyster shell and costs nothing. Wood ash from the kitchen stove, provided in a small open container in the coop, provides calcium carbonate, potassium, and trace minerals that hens self-regulate through voluntary consumption. And raw bones from kitchen meat preparation, boiled until soft, are provided to the flock for calcium and mineral extraction. The Amish hen has continuous access to a mineral buffet assembled entirely from household waste streams that costs nothing to produce and provides a more complex mineral profile than any single-source commercial calcium supplement. The result is eggshells of exceptional thickness and structural integrity that experienced cooks in LaGrange County describe as noticeably different from commercially produced eggs in the hand before they are ever cracked. Now, here is what this means for someone keeping chickens in a suburban backyard or on a small rural property without the quarter-acre paddock system that the LaGrange County operations run. The compost bin feeding system works in any space large enough to hold a compost structure. A 4-foot by 4-foot compost area accessible to the flock produces meaningful insect supplementation for up to 8 hens on a standard suburban lot. The black soldier fly larvae bin works on a back porch. It requires no outdoor space beyond a sheltered corner and produces continuous high-protein feed from kitchen scraps that would otherwise go into a municipal waste stream. The fodder sprouting system works on a kitchen counter. 6 trays in rotation produce fresh green feed for a small backyard flock year-round at a material cost of a few dollars a month. The fermented grain system requires only a ceramic crock and the willingness to plan 48 hours ahead of feeding time. The mineral system requires only the habit of saving eggshells and wood ash rather than discarding them. A backyard flock of 6 hens run on the Amish supplemental feeding system with access to even a small rotational yard can have its purchased feed cost reduced from the standard $25 to $30 per month that most backyard keepers spend to under $6 per month. The nutritional quality of the eggs those hens produce improves simultaneously because the diet they are eating more closely matches the diet. Their biology was designed to process over 10,000 years of evolution before the grain industry decided that evolution's answer was less profitable than their own. The commercial egg on your grocery store shelf was produced by a hen that lived in a space smaller than a sheet of paper, ate nothing but processed grain pellets formulated for maximum production at minimum cost, lived for 18 months before her productivity dropped below the threshold that justified her feed cost, and was then processed and replaced by the next hen in the same system. That egg contains the nutritional profile of that life. The LaGrange County egg came from a hen that spent her days working a rotational paddock, harvesting insects from managed habitat, eating fermented grain and fresh sprouted fodder and black soldier fly larvae from a kitchen waste bin, and living long enough to know the yard well enough to find the best insects in it. That egg contains the nutritional profile of that life, too. Dr. Marsh measured the difference between those 2 nutritional profiles in a laboratory in Indiana in 2018 and found a 340% difference in omega-3 content and a 600% difference in vitamin D. Her university declined to publish it. The grain industry that funds her university did not need to say a word. The funding structure said everything that needed to be said. Drop your state in the comments. Tell me how many birds you keep and what you spend on feed each month, because that number is about to look very different to you. Tell me if you have ever noticed that your store-bought eggs have thinner shells, paler yolks, and less flavor than eggs from a farm you visited, because now you know exactly why that is and exactly what the farm was doing differently. The grain industry spent decades telling you the difference was in the breed of the hen. It was never the breed. It was always the feed. And the feed was always a choice someone made about whether to keep your hen dependent on their product or let her feed herself the way she was always designed to.